few days ago, I swapped my proper mud condition cyclocross tires onto the Crux for the first time, which sort of inspired wanting to go on this snowy ride. For a video that I didn't finish, we went on vacation for the last 2 days. But during that ride, having this thought as I'm re-experiencing what it's like to ride with like crazy low pressure and experience riding through like bumpy conditions, trying to do it on like a race pace. Kind of asking myself the question, like, I don't ride my cross bike as much anymore. Like, did gravel bikes kill cyclocross bikes? Simply put, and right to the point, yeah, they did. But I think the process of how that actually happened is interesting enough to dwell into. And this is how I kind of saw it unfold. First and foremost, I think it's worthwhile to look at the history of cyclocross bike ownership. Think the 90s, early 2000s, even the 2010s. Cross bikes were just happily the second bike owned by most riders. Whether it was a winter or poor weather riding machine, whether it was the bike that they wanted to use because they wanted to ride like crushed stone gravel trails, or like maybe dabble into the world of being a little bit more off-road than you would with your drop bar road bike. Ultimately, I don't see a lot of early cyclocross bike adopters or purchasers or owners being actual cyclocross racers. The sales pitch is just kind of too good to pass up. These bikes, proven in their design and their use that they can handle muddy, terrible conditions for an hour at a time at an all-out pace and come out relatively unscathed every single season, like weekend after weekend, in just the most miserable of conditions, all in the name of like having a good time on a bike. So yes, a cyclocross bike is absolutely going to be capable of handling any of the odd, rainy days on your bicycling commute. As a matter of fact, it's literally designed to thrive in those conditions. Add in some extra provisions on a lot of cross bikes. This one's a bad example of that, but like rack mounts, bottle cage mounts, fender mounts, stuff like that. You're off to the, well, for some people, not races, but for others, yes, races. So what you end up with is two different groups with two different needs riding the same kind of bike. Racers on one side needing that large opening in the front triangle so that they can get their arm through, be able to carry the bike. They want a flat top so that it doesn't hurt the shoulder. They want different kind of bottom bracket heights, different wheel bases, different needs for space and tire in the frame than maybe what the commuter does. Most cross racers, I would say, would argue that you don't need any eyelets for racks or any sort of place to bolt fenders. So there's a definite, certain give and take that cross bikes had to live with for decades. Geometry is designed specifically for the demands of switchbacky, off-cambery, muddy, terrible condition cross courses, and then the extra stuff that people don't want to give up if they're just going to be riding the thing on the road. And then sometime between 2013 and I'm going to arbitrarily pick 2016, something kind of unexpected happens. There's just this absurd, huge splash of excitement and growth around the world of cyclocross racing. The majority of those people who bought cross bikes to be their second bikes are now using them as cross race bikes and giving it a go. Showing up weekend after weekend, enjoying that muddy, disgusting, marvelous hour of pain while riding a bike. Now, I suspect that there was a perfect storm of variables that came together to catapult cyclocross's popularity up to heights that it really had not been before. And I can't comment exactly on what those variables might have been. I can speculate that a lot of people were probably sick of the ultra competitive racing side of the cycling world. And when you look at huge, well put on cyclocross events, they can look a little more grassroots. The heckling looks like it's a good time. The beer drinking, the time that you spend in the tents enjoying the company of everyone else around you. Everyone races at different times if you're at a bigger event, or everybody races at the same time and none of it is too serious. Especially if you look at how the single speed cyclocross world championships are hosted, held, and regarded. I also really can't help but feel like websites like The Radavist really were instrumental in getting more and more people's eyes open to the world of fun having off-road drop bar riding. And if there's anything in this world that's contagious beyond what's happening right now, it's seeing other people having a good time. Hell, I started this channel at like the height of my like cyclocross obsession. Without that, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So here you have an influx of new riders using these more than capable looking machines for their first season of cyclocross racing, and just like that, it's over in like less than 10 weeks. Well, that was super fun, but now it's over. A lot of these people, that was maybe their only bike. They weren't the typical roadie who had a cross bike so they could ride in the winter. They were the curious about bike riding and then saw this cool version of the sport and said, well, I'll just get it. Cyclocross is always a fall winter sport. What do you do with your cross bike in the summer? Especially if you're not looking to be a roadie. And this, again, I think is another time that the Radavist was a pretty pivotal site for getting people to use their cross bikes during non-cross season. I mean, I don't want to give them all the credit, but it's kind of where I spent most of my time, but there's definitely others. Like, keep in mind, the guys at like Bicycling Quarterly, they've been doing this forever. But I do think that the Radavist did the best job of bringing it to like the mainstream. Getting all us hipsters, for lack of a better term, to spend some time on some dirt. So now you've got larger and larger groups using a cyclocross specific bike as more of an off-road road bike. I know I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Turns out a lot of other people did too. Obviously, companies start to take notice. This is what people are doing. This is what people are enjoying to do, but they're doing it on cyclocross bikes. There's opportunities here to tweak geometries and tweak tire clearances to make them a little less cyclocross course demanding and more like spend time on the road demanding. Not to mention we're in the era, the 2013, 2014, 2015s, where drop bar bikes are really starting to experiment with disc brakes. I remember the first like attempt at a adventure-y gravel multi-use drop bar bike, and it was the 2013 Specialized Sector Sport disc, a bike that was discontinued literally the same year and eventually renamed and rebranded as what we all now know as the Diverge. The biggest and most notable differences being this area, the front triangle, a lot more compact geometry. No real need to have to get your arm through here. Tire clearance, not as generous as what a cross bike has to offer. Rack mounts, fender mounts, all that good stuff, that's standard feature. That's what you would expect out of a bike that's now designed to be ridden off-road and deal with your commute and basically do all the things that people said a cross bike could do because of its racing pedigree. Now is like built for that. That's what it's for. And boom, just like that, an avalanche of adventure road bike options pour out of every brand that can get a bike designed and to market as quick as possible. As a bike shop employee, YouTuber, there was a lot of overlap to be seen between a lot of cross bikes that were on the market and a lot of adventure bikes that were coming into market from the same companies. That was a confusing time. 38 millimeter tire was big. Like, that was a big tire for riding off-road then. Most cross bikes would fit a 38 in it all day, no problem. So explaining the differences why you should buy a cross bike or an adventure bike over one another was a confusing time. I made a lot of videos about that kind of stuff. People who don't want to ride cross and they want a bike more geared towards going out and playing on some dirt, I guess. I don't miss that part. But as the popularity of adventure riding and this new gravel riding phenomenon kept taking over, you did very much see a switch of interest and investment from bike companies as a whole. Frame and tire clearance kept getting bigger and bigger. Like the Redwood is a prime example of this, 650B with 2.3 inch tires on it. Like, this thing is a monster compared to anything that my cross bike can fit in it. But what it has resulted in is this switch of where the budget, the entry level bikes are. It used to be cyclocross bikes had a cheaper version for the people who were like, maybe curious about trying cyclocross a little bit, if you look at the cyclocross bike offerings from the bigger companies these days, like Specialized, Cannondale, Trek, Giant, I'm looking at Ridley here, Felt, all of them. None of them have bikes under, here, what's Specialized's cheapest cyclocross bike? $3,200. Cannondale's cheapest one, it is a CAD, it's a CAD X, $2,300. Trek's cheapest cyclocross bike, $2,800. Giant still has a at least under $2,000 cyclocross bike, but it's $1,900. There was a time that you could buy at any point from any of those companies under $1,000 cyclocross bikes. Nowadays, they're all gravel adventure bikes. And it's because if cyclocross was the more fun, less competitive, more engaging, and more inviting version of bike riding and bike racing, then gravel was the next step where you didn't need to have a set period of time at a set course with set suffering required. They could just jump into in a non-competitive way without any sort of like aspirations of needing to be at a certain level. And it's pretty eye-opening to see that obviously not having to worry about stuff like that is significantly more desirable, especially as someone starting out. So it makes sense that a genre that doesn't have such visual competitive side would be more appealing to people who are just trying to get their feet wet. And that is where companies would put their resources, their investments into to create lower cost, lower barrier of entry models for people to get into with. And that, in my experience, is how I saw the unfolding and the rise of cyclocross's popularity evolve into riders taking those bikes off-road, that becoming the new point of interest, and a vast group of people latching onto that. That is how the gravel bike as we know it today was born and eventually killed the sales in cyclocross bikes. Will cyclocross see a rise in popularity like that again? I don't know. I hope it does, but we'll have to wait and see.